Councillor Richard Williams. I represent the Stannington Ward and I chair this meeting. The meeting today is open to the public and welcome to people who are watching it on the webcast. However, there are several documents which are not available to the public and press for commercial reasons. Items 8, 10 and 11 all contain appendices to the report which are not available to the public or press because they contain exempt information relating to financial and business affairs. If any of the members wish to discuss any elements of those, we will need to ask the members of the public and press to kindly leave for that part of the meeting, and we will pause the webcast. As always, our intention is as much as possible to conduct the meeting in an open format so that we can be seen to be transparent. We've received one statement from a member of the public, and I will ask that person to come up shortly. Please can I ask that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. I'm instructed to say there is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff, and the assembly point is Tudor Square. I'm now going to ask the members of the subcommittee to introduce themselves, and I'll then ask officers to introduce themselves as they speak. Thank you.
Fran Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Deputy Chair of the committee.
Mike Chaplin, Councillor for Southey Ward.
Douglas Johnson, Councillor for City Ward.
Councillor Curtis Crossthorne, that's echoey. I am Councillor for Bayton Ward and Chair of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence? It's a bit of a redundant question, but I can see you all here, but formally, there's no apologies. Okay, thank you. Item 2 is exclusion of the press and public. As I've already advised, exclusion of the press and public may apply to items 8, 10 and 11. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Have any members got any wish to declare any interest in any of the items we will be discussing today? No? Great, thank you. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. This was meetings on the 23rd of June and of July. I'll start with the July one, because that's in the order it's come in. It's on, I'll take pages, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, and page 18. That's the July meeting, and the June meeting is page 19, page 20, page 21, page 22, page 23, page 24, page 25, and page 26. Okay? Those are both agreed. Thank you very much. Item 5 is public questions and petitions. We don't have any petitions or public questions, but we do have one statement. This is from Caroline Dewar from the Friends of Graves Park. And would you like to come forward to read your statement? Good afternoon, Caroline. It's nice to see you've actually got your own name tag. If you'd like to read your statement, please do.
Statement regarding the report about the options for the longer-term provision of maintenance services for the Grace Park Charity and the use of Norton Nursery as a council operations base. Grace Park must be maintained by SCC. According to the Open Spaces Act 1906, Sheffield City Council is obliged to maintain and keep the open space in a good and decent state. There is therefore a statutory obligation for Sheffield City Council to maintain Graves Park. It is incorrect to say that this is discretionary. The Friends of Grace Park have been asking to restore this next section as originally agreed in 1998 and further agreed in 2010. The Friends have agreed to restore at no cost to Sheffield City Council and still await permission. Why are Friends of Grace Park not mentioned in this report, other than to say that council officers have met with us to discuss the site, which they haven't for at least 4 years? This section would of course only be open to the public once restored, when it would become part of the Arboretum. There is no need for a public consultation. Why can't space be found for the large equipment on the reduced area of Norton Nurseries site? If the waste collection operations were removed, there would be more space. However, there is enough room on site as it is. And Friends of Grace Park volunteers have offered to work with Sheffield City Council officers to help with the reconfiguration. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I think you make a number of valid points. What I'd like to do is actually send you a written response to your statement, and I hope that a number of the items that you've raised will be covered off when we discuss item 8. Thank you very much. Item 6, members' questions. We have not received any from our members, so thank you very much. Item 7 is the work programme. This is page 29 of the agenda pack, and I'll ask Rachel to run through that. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Rachel Marshall. I want to say good afternoon to everyone. And I'm going to be speaking about the work programme now, which is outlined from page 29 of the private agenda pack. And if you look on, it is page 30, that is where the recommendation is that we will be asking the committee to agree today. Page 32, you will be able to see the proposed additions and amendments that have been made in that table there from the previous meeting, since the previous meeting. So there has been a little bit of movement there. I just wanted to draw your attention to that. From page 33, you can then see the agenda items for forthcoming meetings. So that's what's laid out for the rest of the year so far. I'd like to point out that this is a fluid working document and can change. Things can be added and amended. I will pass back to Chair, and then it's open to the floor for discussion should anybody wish to make any recommendations to that forthcoming work programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do any of the members have any questions or comments they wish to make? No? Okay. In that case, I'll move to the recommendation, which is that the subcommittee's work programme as set out in Appendix 1 be agreed, including any additions and amendments identified in paragraph 5 of the report, and any agreed by members at the meeting. Is that, I'll take silence as affirmation? Okay, that's all agreed then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8 is an item on Norton Nurseries. This is options for the longer-term provision of maintenance services for the Graves Park Charity and the use of Norton Nurseries as a council operation base. As previously stated, there are appendices to the report which are not available to press or public because they contain exempt information relating to financial and business affairs. If members wish to discuss the information in the appendices, we will need to ask members of the press and public to kindly leave that part of the meeting, and we will pause the webcast. Additionally, an addendum to the report was published containing some corrections. Also, I'd like to draw members' attention to the fact that we have a slightly revised set of recommendations which the officers will go through, and we will also show in due course before we vote. So are you taking this, Ruth, today? Okay, Thank you. Could you like to introduce yourself and crack on?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ruth Bell. I'm Head of Parks and Countryside. I'm going to present the report and then myself and my colleagues, Lisa, David and also Alison, are available to answer any questions that you might have. I don't propose to read the report verbatim. I know that trustees will have read and digested the report, so I plan on giving a summary and pulling out the key points, but please note I'm pulling out a lot of key points, so I do have an awful lot to say. I hope you can bear with me. And then at the end we can take any questions that you might have. As the Chair's flagged, the report does contain closed appendices, but I am hopeful that we can have the entire conversation in public without the need to go to closed session. The Charity Trustee SubCommittee took a decision as trustee of the Graves Park Charity on the 23rd of July 2025 to approve a short-term licence for the Council's use of Norton Nurseries until the 13th of November 2025. By way of an update, not included in the report, we've not yet heard from the Charity Commission regarding their giving consent to the parties entering into that short-term licence, just so you're aware. The report today sets out the options available to the Graves Park Charity regarding the longer-term future maintenance and management of Graves Park, with particular reference to the continued or alternative use of the Norton Nurseries site. The report presents a suite of longer-term options available to the charity. Those options are informed by legal advice, operational assessment, and the need to ensure that any future arrangements are demonstrably in the best interest of the charity, as required by the Charities Act 2011 and the Charity Commission's guidance. So I'm now going to go through the 4 options that are detailed at length in the report. Each of the options includes a table at the end of each option which summarises the financial considerations, the alignment with charitable purposes, operational efficiency and service delivery, legal and reputational risks, along with timings, all considerations for the trustee to consider when making their decision. Option 1 is the as-is option. It is that the charity agrees to the Council's ongoing use of Norton Nurseries for the maintenance of Graves Park and other green spaces under a formal 5-year licence agreement with appropriate market-based charges. This option continues the current arrangements whereby the Council delivers maintenance and management of a number of green spaces, including Graves Park, from that Norton Nurseries operational base. A formal licence agreement would be established between the Council and the Graves Park Charity, clearly defining the permitted use, duration, responsibilities and any financial arrangements. The licence, as with the short-term licence already agreed, would include a market-based charge to the Council for the use of that land and facilities at Norton Nurseries, supported by an independent valuation. It's proposed that the licence runs for a period of 5 years, and it would include provisions for monitoring and review, ensuring that the arrangement remains in the best interest of the charity and remains compliant with Charity Commission guidance. This option would allow continuity of service while formalising the relationship and addressing previous concerns about unauthorised use. The paper sets out what the requirements of the valuation were, and it includes copies of the valuations in the closed Appendix 2. That appendix is closed, but the report references the amount proposed for the ongoing use of the space, which is £60,000 per year. The payment received by the charity from the Council would increase overall income to the charity and thereby reduce the level of revenue grant subsidy required from the Council. That would result in no net financial gain or loss to the charity. However, in order to ensure a tangible benefit for the charity, the Council would ring-fence £10,000 of that £60,000 of income specifically for improvements within the charitable park. That dedicated funding would enable enhancements that might not otherwise be achievable, supporting the ongoing development of the park and demonstrating the Council's commitment to delivering a direct and lasting benefit to the charity whilst that licence arrangement is in place. The table at 2.2.5 sets out all of the considerations for the trustee to consider when assessing whether that option is in the best interest of the charity. Option 2. Reduce the footprint of Norton Nursery operational base occupied by the Council, whilst allowing Parks and Countryside to continue to use the site as a base to service green spaces, including Graves Park, under a formal 5-year licence agreement with appropriate market-based charges. This option proposes that the Council continues to operate an operational base from the Norton Nursery site. The base would utilise a smaller footprint than what is currently used. A map showing that proposed reduced footprint of the operational base is shown at Appendix 3. As with the previous option, a formal 5-year licence agreement would be entered into between the Council and the Graves Park Charity, clearly defining the permitted use, duration, responsibilities and a market-based charge for the land and facilities. As mentioned previously, the trustee is aware that an addendum to the report was published towards the end of last week. The report, as published in advance of the meeting, remains in its original form, but the addendum corrects an error in that report. Following review, it was identified that the internal valuation figure originally provided for option 2 was based on an area significantly larger than the smaller footprint actually being proposed for use. As a result of that, the valuation figure of £60,000 for that smaller footprint was incorrect. A revised valuation has now been provided and confirmed by the external valuer. That figure is now £38,000 per year. The valuation from both the internal Sheffield City Council surveyor and the independent valuation for the Graves Park Charity have been provided in closed Appendix 6. The reduction in the rental income from £60,000 to £38,000 under option 2 does result in a small negative financial impact on the charity. To maintain financial neutrality, the Council's annual revenue subsidy to the charity would increase from £74,247 to £96,247 to account for the reduced income. However, because the subsidy amount is higher, the proportionate reduction of 2.42% to reflect the cost of preparation works would also be higher. If that reduction could not be absorbed elsewhere within Parks and Countryside, it would result in a small net deficit of approximately £2,329 to the charity, and that's an increase from the assumption in the original report of £1,797. Sorry, I appreciate that quoting figures is quite difficult to hear and understand, but it's all set out in the report. In light of the revised valuation, the proposal to ring-fence funds for the charitable park improvements under option 2 is altered. It is proposed that £6,300 of the revised £38,000 rental income is ring-fenced, ensuring that under this option the charity would continue to benefit from dedicated funding to support enhancements within Graves Park. Please note that work is ongoing to establish more efficient uses of the smaller footprint and to consider whether something other than the larger vehicles could be moved out of the Norton Nurseries operational base in order to provide this option of the smaller footprint without the need to incur significant costs. In considering this option, trustees should note that a further short-term licence would be required to enable the continued use of the full Norton Nurseries operational footprint. That licence would be needed for a period of up to 12 months to allow sufficient time for the necessary space to be made available at the alternative sites that we're proposing, moving either the larger vehicles or something else out. And then following that transition, a subsequent licence for the reduced area would be required for a 5-year term to support the ongoing operations from Norton Nurseries. If the trustee selects this option, further decisions will be needed regarding the future use of land no longer part of the operational base. Public consultation will be essential to gather views from residents and park users citywide. If the land were made over for public access, feasibility and costing work would need to be undertaken to assess potential uses and determine which options are affordable for the charity. And as with the previous option, there is a table, this time at 2.3.9, setting out the considerations for the trustee to consider when assessing whether that option is in the best interest of the charity. Sheffield City Council currently provides maintenance and management services to the Graves Park Charity as an in-kind contribution delivered through Parks and Countryside. These services have historically been provided without formal agreements, rent or direct charges, and have been supported by an annual grant from the Council to subsidise the charity's operations. The charity does have the option to make its own arrangements for management and maintenance services, which could include outsourcing services from third-party contractors, establishing an in-house charity-run maintenance operation, or having Parks and Countryside provide services from an alternate operational base. And the next two operations consider those choices.
I don't want to interrupt your flow, Ruth, but this is now a new option, isn't it? This is option 3.
Yes. And my next words were going to be option 3. Yeah, the next two, that brief summary that I just gave applies to the next two. So the next two options explore those choices that I just went through. So option 3, withdraw all council operations from Norton Nurseries, with Parks and Countryside continuing to provide maintenance services to the Graves Park charity from an alternative operational base. This option requires the council to establish a new operational base for its staff, vehicles and equipment. This single base would service all sites in the south currently serviced from Norton Nurseries, including Graves Park. The council has identified a feasible council-owned site approximately 6 miles from Graves Park that could be used as an alternative operational base. Relocating staff, vehicles and equipment from Norton Nurseries to this site would incur first-year costs of around £30,000, covering relocation and security. Whilst this cost would be absorbed by Sheffield City Council, it would be proportioned across the affected sites in the south of the city and would represent approximately 1.36% of their allocated annual budgets. For the Graves Park charity, that equates to a potential reduction of around £1,825.76 from the £134,247 annual grant. In order to house everything that's currently occupying Norton Nurseries, the larger vehicles or another part of the operational base would need to be sited elsewhere due to size constraints, and therefore the costs identified in the report at 2.3.4 and 2.3.5 would also apply to this option. Whilst ongoing maintenance costs would be lower in future years, relocating the base would most impact on staff time. With 6 to 7 staff working daily in Graves Park, assuming 25 minutes of additional travel per day at each end of the day, this equates to approximately 1,219 hours or £19,053 annually in a staffing impact to the charity. However, these additional resource costs could be offset by a corresponding reduction in service levels of equivalent value, helping to manage the financial impact within existing budgets. The charity cannot assume that the revenue grant can be increased to cover any shortfall created by the establishment of a new operational base. The charity could therefore be impacted by the operational base being located at a distance from the charitable site. The considerations set out in paragraph 2.3.7 would also apply to this option, as any change in land would require careful assessment of feasibility, costs and affordability for the charity. And the table set out at 2.4.9 sets out the considerations for the trustee to consider when assessing whether that option is in the best interest of the charity. And option 4, withdraw all council operations from Norton Nurseries, with the charity either delivering its own maintenance services or outsourcing them from another provider, not Sheffield City Council, through a contract. The fourth option would include the charity establishing new operational arrangements, including staffing, equipment and service delivery models. The exact financial implications would depend on the approach taken, whether through direct employment or contracting, and the scale and frequency of maintenance required. The absence of an on-site operational base may also affect the responsiveness and efficiency of service delivery, depending on how the new arrangements are structured. This option would provide the charity with full control over how the land is used and maintained. Removing all operations from Norton Nurseries and the charity procuring its own maintenance services would involve the charity establishing a specification for the maintenance and tendering the opportunity to external operators. These services would need to include the provision of staff, all necessary resources and equipment. The cost implications of this are likely to be significant, as in addition to funding the provision of the service, it's reasonable to expect that an operator would expect to make a profit. The charity would need to consider what any contract management arrangements would look like as well. In previous years, the Graves Park charity has not generated enough income to entirely cover the operational costs of the park. The trustee must assume that paying for other services would need to come from other income within the park, at least on a short-term basis. In order to assess both the appetite for such an arrangement and the potential costs, a soft market test exercise for the management and maintenance of Graves Park was undertaken, and details of that soft market test are included at 2.5.6 within the report and in full at Appendix 4. We received 2 responses for the soft market test, and neither operator was able to provide all services required, and closed Appendix 5 provides full detail of that. The responses show a partial appetite to undertake some but not all green space management. However, it's important to note that neither operator was able to provide all services required, even within the elements that they responded to. This suggests that the model that would be required to have third-party management of Graves Park would be incredibly complex, with several operators undertaking the work across multiple contracts. Indicative costs from the respondents suggest that delivering all Graves Park's requirements through external providers would most likely exceed the cost of using the Parks and Countryside services, and that is if suitable suppliers can be secured for all elements. The lack of engagement on several of the lots may indicate that there is not the market for such operations on a single site such as Graves Park, or that the work would not be considered profitable enough by external providers. If the trustee chooses this option, a more extensive soft market test will be necessary to assess whether external providers can fully meet the charitable park's management and maintenance needs, and to determine the associated costs. Should there be a subsequent tender process, further decisions will be required regarding contract approval and authorisation of spend on behalf of the charity. Should the charity decide to secure its own grounds maintenance services independently of Sheffield City Council, any future decisions regarding the provision of a revenue grant will need to be formally considered and approved by the relevant council committee. The charity cannot assume in selecting this option that the same level of grant funding would be available, as there is no statutory obligation for the council to provide this support and no guaranteed minimum amount. And as with previous options, financial implications outlined in 2.3.4, 2.3.5 and 2.4.4 would affect the funding available to the Graves Park charity. Although the charity would not bear the costs in this option of Parks and Countryside relocating elsewhere, there may be an impact on the Parks and Countryside budget for green space management, which might have an impact on the charity's budget. The considerations set out in paragraphs 2.3.7 would also apply to this option, as any change in land use would require careful assessment of feasibility, costs and affordability for the charity. The table at 2.5.16 sets out the considerations for the trustee to consider when assessing whether this option is in the best interest of the charity. Within the report, 3 further options were considered and rejected, and the trustee may want to consider these options more fully, or as a minimum, assure itself that the rejection of those options was in the best interests of the charity. The first of those options was to do nothing. This approach would be inconsistent with the advice received from both the Charity Commission and Independent Counsel. The Commission has stated that the trustee must formally reconsider the current arrangement for the use of the Norton Nurseries site, with a sole focus on whether the current arrangement is in the best interest of the Graves Park charity. Proceeding without undertaking this reassessment would be an ongoing unauthorised use of charitable land, potentially exposing the charity to regulatory scrutiny and undermining public trust. The second of the options was to relocate the operational base elsewhere in the charitable park. This approach would require establishing a new operational location within Graves Park, either for the charity's exclusive use or for the management of a number of green spaces, including Graves Park. The area behind the Graves Park Pavilion, including the adjacent car park for vehicle and equipment storage and the pavilion for staff welfare, was identified as a potential site. However, this option offers no additional benefit to the charity and would result in the loss of existing public parkland, and the report sets out some specific disadvantages that were identified. And the third was that the charity agrees for the council to use Norton Nurseries as an operational base to service only the Graves Park charity, with appropriate market-based charges for maintenance services. This approach would require the removal of the existing operational base from Norton Nurseries. The council would then recreate the operational base elsewhere. Following the removal of the base, including the removal of existing council facilities, vehicles, equipment, waste facilities and staff, the charity would need to create its own much smaller operational base back on Norton Nurseries exclusively to service Graves Park. In order to do so, the cost of such an operation, welfare facilities, storage equipment, waste facilities, etc., would need to be met by the charity. The charity cannot assume that the revenue grant can be increased to cover any shortfall created by the establishment of the new operational base and any implications of it. The establishment of 2 operational bases with separate facilities, equipment and vehicles would remove any operational efficiencies that the charity benefits from through the existing shared base model, and running costs for the new charity base would need to be met by the charity. Additionally, the creation of a new operational base to service the non-charitable sites currently serviced through Norton Nurseries would financially impact the Parks and Countryside budgets, particularly in year 1 as the bases were set up, and this would reduce the level of funding available for Graves Park. The result of these financial impacts on Graves Park would likely be a reduction of standards in the charitable park. So that's my overview. Obviously, the report and the various appendices provide a lot more detail and are written with the charity in mind to allow the trustee to make a decision that is in the best interest of the charity. As the Chair mentioned, the trustee has asked that the recommendations be updated to include reference to the fact that the report actually discusses 7 options, of which 4 are fully worked up. So I'm going to read out the proposed recommendations, and obviously I'm happy for any text to be altered. The Charity Trustee SubCommittee is recommended to 1. Note the contents of this report, including the previous report presented to the Charity Trustee SubCommittee on 23rd of July 2025. And we may wish to add something in there to reference the addendum that was published separately. 2. Consider the options outlined in the report with reference to what is demonstrably in the best interest of the Graves Park charity in accordance with the Charities Act 2011 and Charity Commission guidance. 3. Note that of the options presented, options 1, 2 and 3 are recommended for further consideration. Where satisfied that one of these is in the charity's best interest, approve that option for implementation. And 4. Acknowledge that any decision made by this committee in its capacity as charitable trustee may be subject to approval by the Charity Commission before implementation. Thank you.
Just for a note, that those are behind you, Curtis, it's the recommendations as Ruth has just written out the news. Okay, thank you very much for that overview report. There's a lot of detail in the actual report itself. It's taken a while to get here, but here we are. I'm sure members will have plenty of comments and or questions. Who wants to go? Okay. Councillor Belbin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, for the layout of the report. I think it's really, really helpful to have these options laid out so clearly. It's a bit of a shame we spoiled it about having that addendum having come separately, otherwise everything would have been beautifully in one place. But the tables that lay out the financial implications and the financial risk, I think, are incredibly helpful here. I think for me, we're weighing up, aren't we? There is obviously a financial benefit to the charity, but also the benefit of having increasing amount of space in the park that is available for the public to enjoy somewhere down the line if we can get to that space. So they're the factors I think that we're weighing up here. And it probably won't come as a surprise to anybody who's heard what I've said about this before to know that my preference on this is for option 2, because that does potentially restore some of the space that is currently used as the operations base, has a potential to restore that to parkland, and it comes across as low risk in the financial dealings here, and still with that net gain to the charity in terms of the 6,500 that would be retained by the charity of the fee from the licence. So again, I don't think that's particularly a surprise coming from me. I would like to just be absolutely clear around some of the costs. So if I can just raise a couple of questions there. I think when we've discussed this before, well, first of all, sorry, it talks in the paper around the costs of moving things from the site, around 53,500. I think you're suggesting that the cost of that will be borne by Parks and Countryside, and I'm seeing nods there. Okay, so that's useful to know. I'm assuming that does not include, we've also discussed it at previous times, that there would be costs potentially around if this space becomes public, around things like there is a building on there where there may be some costs around making that building safe. I'm assuming it does not cover those costs. But do you want to just respond to that bit before I raise any other questions? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things, if you don't mind. So first of all, yes, you're absolutely right. It's often very easy to capture the financial impacts of the current use and any change. That is not the only consideration for the trustee, and you're right, it's really important that that is all weighed up. Yes, any costs of relocating either the large vehicles or something out would be borne by Parks and Countryside. And the thing we've tried to explain in the report is Parks and Countryside's budget is finite, so any reduction in that may have a small impact on Graves Park, but we've set out in the report how small that impact is for option two, if any. And I would draw your attention to the point that was made about how we are looking at whether, if it wasn't the larger vehicles that were moved and it was something else that was moved, that £53,000 cost might be smaller, which would be very helpful for all of the sites in Sheffield.
But the point stands around the building. That's right. That's not included within that. Okay. So I think the next discussion point, if you like, I wanted to raise was around public consultation around this. If we did go for this option, I know what you say about public consultation. I'm a big believer in public consultation, but I suppose I want to be clear about what we would be consulting on. Would it be a question of, what's the consultation question here? I think it's not straightforward. We know we have a proposal for that piece of land that is, if not no cost, because I think potentially there would be some costs ultimately to either the charity or to Parks and Countryside, but no cost for the work of the volunteers, but things like the building that we've just mentioned may incur some costs that we're not aware of. So we have a specific proposal, what to do with that piece of land. So how are we going, how general is the consultation question, if you like? Because what I wouldn't want to see, given that we have a proposal, is that we have a really broad consultation that says, should we restore this piece of land to parkland? And then have to go through another phase, if you like, of if people say, yes, we want to restore it to park. Do you see what I mean? It's like, can we think about how we do that consultation in a way that takes on board the options that are already out there and that already exist and the proposal that already exists? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Belvin. I'll answer that question to give Ruth a break from speaking. So the consultation, as you said, would be on if option 2, or actually any of the other options to remove, reduce or remove the operations from the site were selected, then what to do with the site. And as you've pointed out, we do have a proposal from the Friends of Graves Park to extend the Arboretum. So, but we would need to consult on that, as you quite rightly say, because there may be other uses and there may be that it's part of that proposal, part something else. So we can design that consultation together with trustees, with the Friends of Graves Park, but I do think we have to consider whether there are other alternatives that come forward. Because we haven't asked the question, we don't know. We talk to the Friends of Graves Park, so we know what their proposal is. Yourselves, are there any other proposals? And that's what we would need to establish and then take it from there. So it's kind of not doing a starting from scratch consultation and engagement, but we need to understand if there are any other views that we need to consider before coming to a decision.
Is that your? Okay. I'll take Councillor Crossthorne and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Finally. I'm similar to Councillor Belvin, really happy to see this report, and it's mostly easy to read. Couple confirmations in a way. So option 3, the costs are kind of in addition to option 2, aren't they? They're added on. So, yeah, okay, that kind of makes it a lot clearer in my head about the costs involved in it. Because I suppose we are custodians, aren't we, of this park, and we need to make the best decision for the charity as a park, but also thinking about the fact that it's a destination park for the city. It's probably the jewel in our crown of parks. I mean, as chair of Communities, Parks and Leisure, I do not have favourite parks, but but Graves Park is definitely, yeah, definitely. And I was happy to see as well the fact that any idea of outsourcing of the maintenance of it was just a non-starter. That's just not palatable, I don't think, at all. So I think the options in front of us are the ones that need careful consideration. Option one, I'm going to rule out, I think, because something does have to change. I think promises have been made to a friends group for decades about the use of this land, and so I do think something has to change here. So I think I'm leaning towards option two, pending discussion today, but that's the way I'm leaning at the minute. I do have a question about the waste storage and the refuse. I think we heard a comment earlier about it. Would that be in the consideration to be moved off of the site if we do vacate some of this?
Sorry, do you mean under option 2 or do you mean under options 3 and 4? Under option 2, it's not currently being proposed. We have had talks about whether or not it could be located elsewhere on the site, but it is in an ideal location for servicing a number of sites in the south of the city, which is what that operational base does, and that's why obviously we're proposing a licence to use it for multiple sites. But we could have a conversation about where it is and work out whether there is a better location elsewhere on the site. But we're not proposing to remove it off in option 2. In options 3 and 4, it would be moved off. Yes, absolutely. In vacating the site entirely, it would be moved off.
Thank you. I think that it's a tough one. I think as a committee, we probably need to have a deeper look at the use of the refuse collection there. And I've heard complaints. I've also heard, the officer side of things as well. I want to get to the bottom of it. Things like opening hours. I've heard rumours that people there's been trucks going in at night and things, and that shouldn't be happening. And I understand that obviously you're saying it isn't happening, but then when we hear as councillors people saying it is, we have to investigate further on it. So I think that I would be more comfortable with option 2 if we heard back at a later date something about a refuse collection as well. I think that we need to get moving right now on vacating this land. So as I say, I'm leaning more towards option 2 than anything else. But I do think we need further discussions on the storage of rubbish on the site.
Sorry, if I can just, I'm not sure what you're referring to about it being used out of hours. That I'm not aware that that's been raised with us. The operational base operates at the hours that Parks and Countryside operates, and it is secured beyond those hours. There are not trucks coming into the operational base outside of those hours. It is locked. It's not accessed at night, not legally. We don't have people bringing rubbish in the middle of the night. That simply doesn't happen. We have had a visit from the Environment Agency recently on site to look at the refuse facilities there, and they've gone away and informed us that they're very happy with what we're doing there. They're happy that we've got we're doing what we need to do, that our paperwork is all up to date, and we don't need any further permits beyond what we've got, just by way of an update.
I think, though, that if Councillor Crosthorne's raised the issue, obviously I take on face value what your response, but if we could just absolutely get to the bottom that something isn't going on behind your back, so to speak, I think that would just be reassuring for residents and members alike.
If we could be provided with the complaints that you've received, yeah, absolutely, we will investigate further. Yeah, definitely.
Are you finished? Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm sure if there were big trucks going in and out in the middle of the night, we'd definitely have heard about it by now. Also, I'm just a little bit wary. Take your point about your suggestion. I'm not sure they can prove a negative. Unless, of course, we have 24-a-day monitoring. That we've got a video relay to this meeting. I was just want to check on some of the technicalities. So, obviously, it clearly makes sense for the park to be maintained with an operation on site. It would clearly be to the detriment of the park if we didn't have that. So that rules out 3 and 4. What I wanted to ask was if, and clearly it makes sense to free up part of the park, to expand the Arboretum, if that's possible. And I think you're saying it is possible. I just want to ask when, bearing in mind, so we've got currently a licence to regularise things until the 30th of November. What date are we proposing that this new licence would run from, first of all? Would we be in a position to do that by the 30th of November, or is it a bigger piece of work? I suppose that was my first question.
I hope I read this out. This option would, so the existing short-term licence is to the 30th of November. This option would require a further short-term licence for the use of the entire existing operational base. And in the timing section of the table that's at the end of this option, it suggests 12 months, up to 12 months. And then after that, it would revert to that 5-year licence. So yes, the proposal isn't that the space can be shrunk down by 30th of November 2025. The proposal is that it could be shrunk down within 12 months of the decision today, and then could move to that smaller base and that 5-year licence.
We'd be looking to progress any of the options, but if it was option 2, they would be looking to progress that as quickly as possible, and so there would be a new licence required. So we would likely suggest to trustees that revised licence is for up to 12 months, or to allow Ruth and the team enough time to actually make the changes that are needed, because it's not just a case of moving equipment off and then carrying on. So, but we would absolutely do that as quickly as it is possible.
Thanks. I think it's just important to be practical about the timing. You know, we can't just decide things in the abstract if they're not possible to implement. Did you say there's a section of the report about the timing? Because I didn't find that.
So on each of the options in the table that follows the options, one of the rows is timing for all of them.
Sorry, I thought there was something that put them all together. Now that's fine. Okay. I'm just wondering whether it's actually implementable to go to option 2. But I think what you've described in practice is where everyone's going. What I also interested in terms of the Charity Commission, David, this might be one for you, is I know we report back that we've not had any response from the Charity Commission. They've just not responded since our last meeting in July, where we've put forward this proposal. Do we actually have to await their permission to enter into a licence, or can we go ahead and enter into a licence unless and until the Charity Commission decides to disapprove it?
David Sellers, Senior. We have to wait in any event from the Commission to actually give us approval to enter into a licence of any duration at all, because of the relationship that we'd be creating, because of the conflict of interest that we have. Is that okay?
That is okay, yeah. So presumably that means that we haven't actually entered into a licence that runs to the 30th of November, even though we'd agreed to agree to a licence. But okay, so the same position would arise here. So if the Charity Commission thought there was a problem with it, then we could deal with it then. And if they took their time, then it just had more time to get on with the practical work. Yeah. That's okay. And I suppose a final question just about costs and that. So obviously, if there is a move towards creating more space for the Arboretum, which I think would be welcome, I mean, it's a park improvement anywhere, and we've identified various costs there. So there's the cost of moving the plant, there's the cost of the buildings that Councillor Belbin was referring to, which I'm sure would probably be necessary, wouldn't they? And then there's an ongoing revenue cost, isn't there, for operating different things in different areas. What I was just wanting to get to is, as you said, it'll be parks and countryside that meet that, so it'll have an impact on all the parks. But I just wonder, does this relate to just the parks in the south of the city, or is it parks across the whole city that will be impacted by this, you know, effectively reduction in revenue?
I can take that if that's okay. So two things. So first of all, it would impact on the parks that are serviced currently from Norton Nurseries, which is not all parks in the city, obviously it's just a number in the south. But also just to say, when we're talking about the costs of, for example, option 2, things like the building that may become an issue as and when a further section of parkland is restored, that's not included in the costs in this report. That's a future decision for the trustee. So just to say that they're separate, the costs in the report for option 2 set out what would be needed to move some elements of the operational base out, and then future decisions would be needed on that parkland, including what costs there might be to the charity if there was issues with buildings. So there is a building that could, for example, need demolition. But those two things are separate, and we don't have any costs for that building because we're not at that stage yet.
Ruth, just to add, so we've tried to proportion the costs out in the report as best we can to the areas that are currently serviced by Norton, by using Norton Nurseries, and then we've applied some proportionate reductions to budgets on that basis. And would you mind me just going back to Councillor Johnson's point, Chair, on the section 105 that David explained? When we submitted that, and please correct me if I get this wrong, when we submitted that request for approval after the initial decision last November by trustees, then the Charity Commission came back, if you remember, and said you need to get further advice. And we sought the Counsel advice, and then we brought the subsequent reports back to this committee. So as a result of that original request, we've almost landed at this position today. We don't have that approval yet after the decision in July, but we have taken steps to not to correct, but to address the points raised by the Charity Commission as a result of that.
Okay, no, thanks. I think we're getting into sort of Donald Rumsfeld territory. We've got the known knowns of the costs you set out here. The known unknowns of those extra costs are now being identified, but we don't know how much they are. But once you get into construction work, they always add up. And then you've got the unknown unknowns in the sense that somewhere it's got to cost some money to develop this parkland and maybe decontaminate it, move into arboretum, plants and trees, arrange a maintenance management schedule. And that's a complete unknown, isn't it? So we don't know how much that cost is going to be at all. What do we need to do to develop those costs before we can make a fully informed decision as to the future of the area? And I might be looking to any members of the committee to answer that as well as the actual practical side.
So I guess the starting point would be to say that this report and this decision is about whether or not you wish to have an operational base at Norton Nurseries, and if you do, what size you wish that to be, and also whether you wish for Parks and Countryside to continue delivering maintenance services. Everything beyond that is outside the scope of this report, and yes, absolutely subject to further decisions.
Yeah.
But we don't have that information because it's not part of this decision. It would be part of subsequent decisions. So
and any consultation and engagement that took place. So we have the proposal from the Friends of Graves Park that said they would extend the arboretum at no cost to the council. So that's a known. What we need to develop then is a maintenance programme for that area, which would be an unknown currently. But then anything else that came back through consultation and engagement, we'd need to develop the proposals, then bring it back to trustees so you can make an informed decision based on the costs that we put to you then, if that's okay.
Which, just to wrap this up, I think possibly brings us back to timing. I mean, I think, to answer your questions, which actually is a very good way of setting them out there, I don't think anyone's proposing to sort of take the maintenance of Grace Park off-site, so there still needs to be an operational base. I think we'll all agree that it would, we'd like it to be smaller than it is now, if that means we can free up some extra arboretum, nice parkland, so we'll go in that direction, but it might just be the practical side of when that is going to be done and how much it's going to cost, you know, given the impact on all the other parks there. Might just need to reflect on just whether those recommendations actually address that and don't tie us into something that then becomes a millstone around our necks again. Hope it's okay. Just go through that back to the chair and the rest of the committee here.
Councillor Chaplin, I know you wanted to speak. Councillor Belbin, was that did you want to speak with reference to that particular point?
Yes, it was that last point, sorry, and looking at the recommendation in front of us, which is we're satisfied, I'm looking at recommendation 3, that talks about we're satisfied that one of these is in the charity's best interest, approve that option for implementation. Now, I'm fairly sure I've heard Councillor Crosthorne say, I don't like option 1, and Councillor Johnson say he doesn't like options 3 and 4. So it kind of feels that we are very much heading towards option 2, but do we need to make, I suppose, what do we mean by implementation then is the kind of question. Can we agree here we want to further implement option 2 so that we start doing the next steps, which will be consultation and costing out and so on, and can we take that here, and does that mean we have to put forward another specific recommendation that we think we are satisfied, if you see what I mean?
I will likely defer to Robert shortly, but yes, what implementation in that context means is that selecting the option 2, I'll be presumptuous, and reduce the footprint of the operating base, to reduce the operating base, to turn part of the Norton Nurseries back to parkland, and then to look at the other options in to grant a further licence while we do that, and then to look at the options for the freed up space in Norton Nurseries. And all of those, other than the licence, actually the licence would need to come back in due course as well if it was only for 12 months. So the licence would need to come back.
Unless you were able to, and I guess this might be a further question for Robert, if option 2 was chosen, could the committee today approve short-term licence for up to 12 months, which at the point that the footprint can be reduced is overridden by a different licence for 5 years based on that reduced footprint? Can both of those things be approved by committee and sent to the Charity Commission for their approval? Or does it require a further decision in 12 months at the point that the footprint can be reduced?
When we've got further options, sorry.
Are we able to be specific at this stage as to what it will look like in 12 months in terms of the extent of the licence? Are we saying that, if the trustee today is able to know what footprints and terms, including the value, that the 5-year licence would be on, then I think it's done everything it would need to do for the next bit. So the answer would be, I think, yes, that reads that option 2 would be, what you're saying, it would be a 12-month initial licence in order for, what's that first stage, what's being carried out in first phase?
Yeah. For the removal of part of the operations to allow the footprint to be reduced.
Right.
And yes, the report contains information about what the reduced footprint looks like. There is a map. Apologies, I can't remember which appendix it's in, but it's in the public domain. And also there is the revised valuation, which the revised valuation is in the closed appendix, but the report contains the amount of £38,000 for that reduced footprint. So yes, I believe all of the information that's required for that longer 5-year licence on that reduced footprint is available. So it'd be a short-term, up to 12-month licence on the existing footprint to allow Parks and Countryside the time to either remove the large vehicles and find an alternate home for them, and we've got some plans for that, or to reconfigure things so something else is removed from the site to allow that footprint to be reduced. But yeah, we know what the reduced footprint is. We know what that looks like. Does that make sense?
Can I just say something, if I'm hearing this right? We're thinking about, if option 2 is adopted, that there will be a further 12-month period in which time the footprint's reduced, equipment is removed, etc., etc. And then once that's done and you've reduced the footprint for the purpose of solely of implementing maintenance at the park, yeah.
No.
Oh, no,
And
sorry.
other green spaces in the area.
Oh, and other green spaces
Yeah.
in there, sorry. That's where
Yeah.
I've got myself confused. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll shut up now.
No, that's fine.
I think so. The only reason it would come back is if actually that first phase that you didn't know the outcome, in the sense that if it might be possible to achieve more of a reduction, but if you're clear in advising the trustees today that it's known now, then the trustees can make the decision today. Clear enough, Chair.
Okay. Douglas, sorry, Mike, I'll come to you in a minute.
Happy for Met Light Guide if you want. You haven't spoken much yet.
I haven't spoken at all,
You
except to give my name. So, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for getting us to this point in this report. Like Curtis and Fran, I do lean towards option 2. I think it brings us a lot closer to what the Friends of Graves Park have been asking for many years. And I'm pleased to hear from officers that we could actually put that forward as a proposal, an additional recommendation today in the report. I only had a question like Curtis did over that part of the site that is being used for collecting rubbish. Some of it, I believe, is organic, but other parts are not organic. And if that would, have I understood right that if we go with option 2, that would still remain and it would still be a collection point for some of the other sites in the south? So I would come back then and ask, have we put the correct value on the use of that site that we as trustees are renting out to the council?
I believe so. The independent valuer has visited the site. They've visited it prior to it being valued at the existing footprint, so they know what is on the site and how that site is used. So I do believe it has the right value. It's been valued by an external valuer who did it independently on behalf of the charity, and also valued internally by our colleagues in property to give the council's value as well.
So this does contribute towards the useful income towards the charity. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm that we've had...
Could you just introduce yourself, please? And
Sorry. Hello, my name's Alison Turner-Mills. I'm a Senior Surveyor in Property Services. One of my colleagues is the person that has undertaken the internal valuation, and I've liaised with the person that did the external valuation. They are aware of the need for a reduced footprint. They are aware of, they have the relevant competency and experience to undertake this, and have undertaken valuations for other charities. Yeah. So I'm confident that they know, you know, all the ins and outs that the needs to have taken into account in arriving at the valuation for the reduced area.
Yeah. You happy with that, Mike? Okay.
Happy with that, thank you.
Thank you. Douglas.
Yeah, thanks, yeah. Just trying to think through where I think we're going on this. So, I mean, I think just because we actually can't work literal magic, so we can't do things instantly, and even I won't expect you to do that. It seems like we're all content for operations for the whole thing to carry on at the site in general, so that could effectively mean extending the licence that we'd already agreed in principle at the last committee meeting. Because clearly we won't be in a position to have the whole site or the next section of the site cleared by the 30th of November. So you're going to need to extend it maybe for periods up to 12 months. And then I'm thinking the committee could maybe ask officers to work on a plan to reduce the operational site of the area to with reference to the plan on page 127, which currently shows the current site and the site which we could ask officers to reduce it to. Presumably that will be subject to approval by the Charity Commission and with a cap on time of 12 months to get into the licence. I'm sort of looking at Rob because I'm hoping could formulate some ideas of that into words if the committee feels that that is the direction we're going in. I think I'm not speaking out of turn with anyone else here who's spoken. Obviously, tell me if I'm wrong.
What I would say, Douglas, is I think if we are going to extend this licence, it needs to be related to the future use rather than just an open-end, you know, not open-ended, but just the same licence as we agreed last time.
Well, sorry, can I come back? So the reason I was just getting the same licence is because that piece of work's already been done and this committee already agreed to that type of licence at the last committee meeting. So just for consistency, and it's what's happening at the moment. But obviously we want the officers to get on with reducing the size of the plot in physical sense as soon as possible, but just in the meantime. And then as soon as that's done, we've got to have a way of switching over to a licence for the reduced amount of space here, which I probably feel would probably have to come back to the committee as a formality at that switchover point, but if it could be incorporated now, that'd be fine by me.
I think Robert was suggesting it could be done now rather than having to come back.
Yeah.
Just while you're talking, Robert, our next formal meeting of this subcommittee is the 24th of November. Is it feasible that we could bring an extension to the licence back for that, or is that too tight?
So I think I think where we're going was certainly Councillor Johnson's proposal there is that the committee is being suggested to resolve to agree a licence of up to 12 months to allow for the reduction of the footprint of the Norton Nursery operational base occupied by the council, while allowing P&C to continue to use the site as a base to service green spaces, including Graves Park, and to further agree a 5-year licence agreement with appropriate market-based charges following the completion of the works, provided that is within the footprint described on the plan at page 127. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. So what that says, basically, is by implication, is that if there is a change to that footprint, i.e. it's smaller, because you wouldn't just keep empty space on there, because it's inefficient for both sides, then this would automatically come back. If it doesn't, and it's squarely within that plan, then it can just run, subject to the point that we note, which is at 4, which is the acknowledgement that any decision of today's committee is subject to the approval of the Charity Commission. So, is that helpful, Chair?
I think it is helpful. Is it not simplest just to say that we are approving an option for implementation, because that is all kind of within that option anyway, and rather than trying to overcomplicate it by spelling everything out.
Lisa, put your mic on.
Do you know what? Perhaps it's better that I don't, because option 2 includes the reference to
The extent the licence for 12 months, the licence for 5 years.
the licence for 5 years. Sorry, yeah. Consultation
And engagement, and coming back with a proposal for the use of the area that could be returned to parkland.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to tangle this up too much. I'm looking at page 45 of the pack. I'm not seeing within there an obvious reference to the consultation bit or the 12 months. So where's...
That's option 1 there, Robert.
So, in option 2, 238 refers to consultation and further decisions on the area of land that will no longer form part of the operational base. 237 refers to the short-term licence to allow parts and countryside the time to reduce that footprint.
Yes, I'm just trying to craft the point that we are having a clear form of resolution out of today's decision. That's discussion for consideration, but in terms of resolved outcome, it is the more specific terms of the we're approving that option for implementation. Sorry, Councillor, but I do agree that it's by implication that we are adopting those parts. But I think probably what we're agreeing to say is that the form of resolution just captures in specific terms the up to 12 months license, the up to 12 months. So I think, is that generally understood by the committee? That's what the proposal is. That you're resolving to the proposal is to go with option 2, and as described in 2.3.6, 2.3.7 and 2.3.8, that includes a 12-month period of transition and also that there will be a public consultation. Thank you.
Yeah. Can we make sure that the Charity Commission get all that so that there's no ambiguity?
Yeah, we've got Rachel Marshall's rapid typing has no doubt captured that.
I'd just say I'd be happy with that, and if you can tidy up the wording of what you said, afterwards be able to go with that, I think.
Thank you. Just a very small point. Not intending to change the recommendations, don't worry. Would we, as a committee, maybe with CPL as well, be able to have a briefing on the practicalities of it all, how it will look as things get developed, possibly even a site visit as well, so we can just talk through it all and see it practically, and then we can also bring in the conversations we had about the refuse collection as well with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good point. Lisa.
Apologies, when you were saying Lisa, put your mic on. I thought you were saying Lisa. Lisa's, not Lisa, as in Lisa's, not licence. And I got very confused, and that's why I just carried on speaking. So apologies for that. And then just want to come back on Councillor Chaplin's point on the waste and the valuation. On the closed appendix with the external valuer, there is details on what they've taken into account, the land. So there's quite a lot of detail in there, and will hopefully give you some reassurance.
Thank you. The only comment I have really is that obviously we have to get approval from the Charity Commission for all this, but there's a lot that can be going on while we're waiting for that approval. We're not going to wait for that approval before we start working on this. Okay, thank you. If there's no other comments or questions, firstly, thank you very much for the report. There's a tremendous amount of work that's gone into this, and it's not, and I know that there's a lot that's not been put in the report that has had to be covered. I think it's a major step forward. If you're happy that Robert will draft the final recommendation wording, incorporating the points that Councillor Johnson has highlighted, and on that basis, I will go to the recommendation as they stand. You're not going to be able to do that now, are you, Robert?
I'm just in the process of it, but so I can. Do you want me to do that again, or are we all clear?
I think for clarity, we should do it.
Councillor. So the committee is resolving to implement option 2, and that's on the terms described, to reduce the footprint of the Norton Nursery operational base occupied by the council, whilst allowing P&C to continue to use the site as a base to service green spaces, including the Groves Park, under a formal 5-year licence agreement with appropriate market-based charges, and the 12-month short-term handover licence described in the report, together with the consultation process described in the report.
Please copy and paste and send to me.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that's the recommendation. Can I take silence as assent? That is resolved. Thank you very much for that. Item 9, Rose Garden Cafe progress update. I have been fortunate enough to attend a couple of the partnership meetings. It's an excellent model for how things are working. This is an important next stage, and I would invite officers and chair of the partnership to come forward, and officers of the partnership to come forward and give us their progress report. When you are ready, could you, when you speak, could you, for the first time, please, could you just introduce yourselves? Thank you.
Okay, hello, I'm Rebecca Nixon and I am a project manager and I'm also a representative of the Rose Garden Cafe Partnership for Sheffield City Council. Today, members of the partnership will be providing a progress update on the Rose Garden Cafe Partnership progress and on the actions that were agreed in October 2023 at this committee. In particular, I'm going to hand over to other members of the partnership as well to talk around the progress that we've made in the last 6 months. I'm just going to talk on the recommendation 4, which is the focus of this report. So the recommendation is to support the partnership to continue to establish funds for the full restoration and refurbishment for the Stage 2 cost plan estimate of 2.6 million, which is what we presented in March, noting that it will be raised in tranches to meet the spending profile as described in section 2. So that's the key, development, is that as a partnership we've decided that we would like to apply for funding sources, looking at phasing the works for a number of reasons. And section 2 is the main section where we've got the kind of progress over the last 6 months. And we talk around the reason why we're looking to apply for funds in phases rather for the full chunk, and that's really to kind of mitigate risk, and there's lots of risks that we continue to mitigate through the partnership meetings, but it's to align to funders' requirements, it's to kind of put it into bite-sized chunks, and that doesn't mean that we're looking to reduce the scope of works, it just means that we're looking to phase it over a longer length of time. And still the kind of full scope of works aligns to the consultation that we did back last year. Other than that, I'll hand you over to other members of the partnership who'll give updates on the kind of fundraising. And just a final point from me is we now have discussed the financial standing. In our monthly partnership meetings, we have included the latest financial standing in the report. And we've also decided as a partnership to renew Chris's chair contract for a further year. And that's it from me. So I will now hand over to Chris. Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Becky. I'm Chris Hallam. I'm the independent chair of the partnership. I thought I'd just kind of give you a little bit of background as to why we've made the decision that we've made and why we're asking for your permission today. It became obvious from talking to the major funder that we initially approached, which is the National Lottery Heritage Fund, that as the plans that we'd put forward were not entirely heritage restoration, that they would not be able to fund the whole of the project. In simple terms, they're not going to provide us with extensions to the kitchen, they're not going to provide us with a community room, they're not going to deal with things like lighting to the car park. They're not heritage challenges. So we recognise that we need to be able to have a more nuanced approach to funders, and to do that, notwithstanding the fact that we know it's suboptimal for the operator and potentially elongates the time frame that the whole works take, we thought we needed to ask your permission to look at breaking those applications up. We still intend to approach the same funders that we were looking to approach before, and I'll hand over to Caroline in a moment. Caroline is leading our efforts on grant applications, and we do have a large number of possible funders in our sites, but we need to be able to tailor the bids to their funding demands rather than provide an umbrella and say, just give us a chunk of the money towards the overall project. They like to see something that specifically matches their requirements. I think the only other thing I would say, that the public continue to support us hugely. We have surpassed the initial £25,000 fundraising target. In fact, we've raised that now to £37,500, which represents the 5% we need for the 700,000 total, which is kind of the ballpark figure for the front wall and the works that go around that. And we have a really rich calendar of events planned, including everything from sort of performances by young people in the cafe to raise money, through to working with parks to a potential vintage car show in the park next year. Lots of really great events. So the public continue to support us, and they did so over this last weekend. We hold events that will raise £500, £600, £700 up to a couple of £1,000. It's really heartening to see how much the public are behind us. There has been one or two wrinkles since this report was published and the £2.6 million was surfaced. We're all aware of how that's made up. Some of the public perhaps weren't, and you look at the Rose Garden Cafe and think, how do you spend £2.5 million on that? But we're not talking about spending £2.5 million on that. We're talking about a big project that includes lots of improvements and lots of additional functionality. So, yeah, Caroline, do you want to say a little bit about the response you've had from funders and how you're approaching the grant applications?
Yes, so we are looking at the moment, there's about 15 different funders that we're looking at. One of the reasons for breaking it down, as you've already explained, is it depends what the funder is prepared to fund. Now, that doesn't necessarily, these things don't need to be done in a linear way. Some of these things can be applied for and might happen in parallel. In fact, that would be preferable. So if we were able to get the funding for the changing place and the extension at the back at about the same time as for the main structure of the building, for example, those can all happen together. It just depends on whether we get the money and how much we get. However, there are certain things on there, like you mentioned, lighting to the car park. That's an add-on, really, and can be bolted on at any time. So it's a question of what the funders are prepared to fund, the sorts of things that they fund, and also a lot of funders like to know who else you're applying to and if you're applying to anybody else. So that's all interwoven in what we're doing at the moment. We have, I think there are 4 different applications that need to be made certainly by the end of this October. The big one we need to look at needs to be done in November, or one of the big ones needs to be done in November. And there are a couple of places that give large amounts of funding which don't have any deadlines. So we can do that at any time when we're ready, which is what we intend to do. So it's like anything else with making these funding applications. There's an awful lot of planning goes into that, as you know. There's an awful lot of writing goes into that, as you know. There's an awful lot of seeing how these parts fit together, as you know. And we're just about there. We're now at the point where we're going to be putting these funding applications in to the places. And with just a few tweaks, there are 1 or 2 that will certainly go in by the end of this month. But we just wanted to explain to you that it's not you can't go, as you probably already know, to one place and say we want this. And we have taken that into account and broken down how we can do this. So I think we're very nearly there. The Friends of Grace Park, however, we have our own deadline, which is July 2027, which would be the 100th anniversary of that building first being opened. So we're aiming for that. We might miss it, but we're aiming for that.
I think, no, it would be remiss of me. Caroline's using the word we. She is doing a huge amount of the heavy lifting on these applications because of her experience of getting grant applications successfully admitted through Friends of Grace Park. So, you know, and we'd happily share some of our grant applications. They are really compelling business cases to support the cafe, and I think we will be successful in gaining funding from a number of different places. The key for us is the National Lottery Heritage Fund in November, when we look to try and get the funding for the front wall. If that comes through, and I think your deadline's on, isn't it?
Yes, the only thing about the National Lottery Heritage Fund application is, because Sheffield City Council, as part of the partnership, is the lead part of the partnership, they are the people that have to put that application in. So they are the people that need to do the project inquiry. Now, we've written the project inquiry, well, I've written the project inquiry, and it's just a question now of working with council officers to see how that can be done expediently.
So one of the things you might notice, Chair, over the next week or so is a number of inquiries coming through about the kind of timeline and sign-off for that process. You, as a council, are looking to put in place, I understand, somebody who will be coordinating National Lottery bids across the city, but that person's not yet in post, as I understand it, or is about to be in post. We're going to need somebody who can sign off that application to sign it before the November deadline. So one of the actions from our recent partnership meeting was that I think Nathan took an action to understand the pathway through the council for getting sign-off. It may well be that that needs to come in front of you as this committee. I don't know what the approval route will be, but effectively you will be asking for a grant application, expression of interest, of around £700,000 from that funder. So I would imagine that will need to go through relatively senior sign-off. So you should be aware of that.
I can add to that. So this is part of I think a wider piece of work that as a council we are looking at. What is the pipeline of projects for certain external grants, including the Heritage Lottery Fund? So yeah, we're definitely looking at that, and myself, Nathan, Catherine and Simon as SCC representatives on the partnership will be taking that piece of work forward. So yeah, I think we're in a really actually very exciting place, and we've also been having continued conversations with the professionals, so the architect, the cost managers, the engineer, to understand how these phases work and how they'll actually be done, which is really relevant. And I think when we sit here sometimes, well, I know I do it as well, we don't look back on what we've achieved as a partnership, and actually we obviously had scaffolding all inside the cafe when we started as a partnership. So as a partnership we've managed to not only deliver a kind of public consultation together where every partnership member took ownership of tasks, we've actually taken the scaffolding out of the cafe and reopened the internal of the cafe fully, and I'm actually very hopeful and excited that we're about to deliver the next thing as a partnership. So yeah.
And I think, you know, this is one of the example of the funding approval and how that gets signed off by the council is one of the ways in which this partnership is breaking new ground.
Yeah.
In the same way that you now have a procurement framework where pro bono activity and materials are now included, that was us breaking that ground too. So I think it is, we are pushing on with this stuff. So.
Was that? Okay. Let's keep it brief then. Just want to say it's obviously very commendable that this is going on. It's quite exciting when you think of it as in not just a single action but an ongoing process, which I guess you're reflecting by talking about doing this in tranches of funding, and you can keep it coming in, really. So, yeah, really look forward to seeing what comes out of this. And actually really interesting what you've uncovered with the Heritage Lottery Funds. I mean, I think we often talked about the fact that it's actually really important to coordinate with what's going on, because if you've got two neighbouring projects that look as though they're competing with each other, actually to any major funder, that's evidence that they're not talking to each other and can disadvantage them both, really. So it's a really important thing you've got in the bag there. But not really exciting, so look forward to seeing what comes of it.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you. Yeah, I really want to say a big thank you to everybody involved, but especially to those of you who are doing this on a voluntary basis. And it's, I think, as you've said, it's a great example of partnership working, and we've got people all over the city who want to make the city a fantastic place to live and to look after their spaces, and it's a really great model that I think we can use in the future. I thought we did have an officer who is already coordinating those bids, but I could be wrong. So I won't throw names around, and it's possible that we're looking at kind of reconfiguring that so that we've got someone, I think it was an existing officer who's perhaps taking it on temporarily, and maybe we're looking at doing that in a more sustainable way. I just want to ask something just about the COSA budget stuff on page 205, 2.1.4, it talks about the financial standing there, and just being a bit clear about, we've got some funds that are spent and committed. Are any of those funds spent and committed towards any of the phases? Like phase 1A, have we already effectively raised some of those funds? It looks as if some of the remaining balance that's there, as well as what the essential compliance and maintenance commitment is, that's part of that commitment that would go into phase 1A. Is that, I suppose I'm just trying to get a sense of how far are we already towards raising the funds for phase 1A, which I think is the 700,000 you're talking about, Chris. It says 650,000 here, so I'm just trying to be clear on where we are with that. But thank you, everybody involved in the work.
Yeah, I can come back to that. So yeah, the 650, 700 is, so phase 1 is 700, but we could break that down into 1A, 1B, but we're still working through that detail. In terms of spent and committed, so the total, which is the 106,000, that is already spent, so that's not committed towards any future phases. And then the remaining balance of 95,000 is what we've got remaining, which could go towards phase 1A.
We're conscious, one of the things, we're trying to de-risk the project as we go forward, so we have decided that we wouldn't progress, for example, to REBA Stage 3 until we know that we're funded. We could have spent some of those funds moving towards REBA Stage 3, but that would have been at risk. And we're now very conscious that apart from the essential compliance and maintenance fund monies, the chunk of what's left in there is the fundraising from the public. We wanted to be able to say specifically that had gone to point to a brick and say, that brick, you paid for it. That's what we really want. We want that narrative. So we didn't want to spend that money on, for example, more professional consultation fees and more work on REBA Stage 3 till we know we're funded. So the answer is yes, it kind of will go into that pot, absolutely. Once we know we're funded, you'll just see that column expand, and we can start to work from that. But we passionately want to make sure that the funds raised by the public are spent on the building, because that's what they told us they've given us the money for.
If I can also just add, it's the idea of match funding. So that pot of money from the public is match funding. So when one goes to a funder, one can say, you know, have you raised 5% of this project? Yes, we have, and it's that. And we haven't spent it yet. That's
where the 37,000 target comes from. It's 5% of the phase 1.
Yeah, I understand that. And then you've talked about pro bono contributions as well, which can also be included in your match funding. So can you see any of those pro bono contributions contributing towards that target?
So, yeah, absolutely. One of the things we talk about quite a lot is the kind of, in our head, the difference between the professional costing of this project, and we have a passion that we'd get it delivered for less than that, because we know lots of organisations that stand ready to work with us and give us materials and labour for free. In fact, we already are doing that. Chris Hill, our architect, has given us a lot of time pro bono. So we definitely see that as a ceiling, not a target. Yeah. Let's put it that way. And we would like to deliver this underneath that using pro bono. But yeah, you know, that's how we see it from where we are. We get the money in first, and then we'll be very Yorkshire about it.
Councillor Crosthorne.
Thank you. I think somebody earlier said that often we don't look back to see where we've come from. And I think when all of this started, it was, to put it bluntly, a good example of how not to do community involvement and things. And now we're at the opposite end with a great example of how to do community involvement. And I think that just vaguely spoke about pro bono work. I think that's proof that as a city we're not going to let our heritage assets fall. So it's a great spirit that I think you've helped nurture here. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you've done on it, and well done. And could I interest you in the Central Library or the Town Hall? We could do with some help there as well. But seriously, no, thank you for all of this community involvement. It's really good to read and hear as well, so thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I simply want to add my praise for the work you're doing, and particularly to Caroline, who must be spending hours and hours working on grant applications. Really dull. It's the hard yards.
To the small print.
It's much underappreciated. And just want you to know that we appreciate the work that you're putting in there, Caroline. And I must admit, when I probably slightly misunderstood this report when I first looked at it, because I thought, well, you've got to get to there and then to there and then to there with each of the grant pots, but potentially you could actually get all that come in one go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or close to.
It's the heritage nature, really. That's a very specific ask and is about £700,000 worth of cost. The rest of it is renewing what's there, building on it, developing it, all sorts of stuff like that. Heat, light, power, new ways of heating the building, running it on a much lower carbon footprint. All those things that you would do if you could do. Mm-hmm. That's what that plan involves. So.
It's just finding who would be prepared to help you with that and give you a substantial sum to get those things that actually not only respect the heritage of the building, of the Rose Garden Cafe, but also bring us into the 21st century to meet those modern needs that we have. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Could you turn your mic off, please? Great, thank you. I think the members have really reflected on the good work that you're doing. I think everybody in the city reflects on the good work you're doing, and as a group we wish you all the success in your fundraising and the work going forward. I suppose the question I have to ask is what more can we do for you? So please do not hesitate to be in contact with us if you need our support, whether it's for a grant application or just, you know, sort of support generally. You know, we're here to help you.
I think the next phase it's going to be deadline critical. So getting the right signatures on the right bits of paper in time to get things in to the funders is going to be critical. And if, you know, a standalone organisation can take care of that itself, but the partnership needs to rely on all the partners to be able to meet those deadlines. So that, I think, would be the call out, Caroline, that it's particularly between now and November, you might see a number of applications that need to flow through, and it's just so that you've got the context around understanding what it is we're trying to do, and you can help us to expedite the signature of those. That's it really for us now.
If I could just say, the urgent one is the project inquiry, which we need to put in, or the council needs to put in on our behalf, and then they have to reply to us within 10 days. And hopefully that reply will say, yes, you can put an application in. and that application needs to go in by the 12th of November. So it's a really tight one, but we need that project inquiry to be put in.
By the 24th September? Early September, mid-September?
Imminently, it could go in, because it's been written, it could go in as soon as.
Okay.
And then once that goes in, it's 10 days, I think, that they have a turnaround and will let us know whether, hopefully, we'll be able to put in an application. And then we will make sure that that application has already been written before they give us the go-ahead.
You can go on holiday then 10 days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll make every effort to find out who the right person is in the council to get that done within those deadlines.
Sorry, it may be a straightforward matter, Chair. It may be easier. We don't know. It's an expression of interest. Yeah, expression of interest.
Expression of interest.
Yeah.
No, project inquiry.
Project inquiry, so it may be straightforward.
Well, just to say thank you very much for coming in. Great report. Look forward to the next one in perhaps in 3 months' time, or whenever you think you've got something particularly interesting to say. But it's, as Councillor Crosthorne has said, we must remember where we came from and where we are now, and it's a great model going forward. So thank you. Before you go, we just need to formally agree the recommendations, don't we? I get too excited, sorry about that. So the recommendations are that the Charity Trustee SubCommittee is recommended to 1. Note the progress made towards the actions agreed in the October 2023 report. Agree to receive a further report on progress towards establishing of funding sources as agreed in the October 2023 report. Number 3 is note that further updates and decisions will be taken to the appropriate committee as required. And 4, most importantly, support the partnership to continue to establish funds for the full restoration and refurbishment for the Stage 2 cost plan estimate of 2.6 million, noting that it will be raised in tranches to meet the spending profile as described in section 2.11. Is that agreed? That's unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. Item 10 is the Endcliffe Park Cafe lease of the cafe.
Hi, I'm Joanne Holland. My title's incorrect on here, so I'm business manager for Parks and Countryside. So I'm here today regarding Endcliffe Park Cafe. I'm not intending to read the full report, but I've pulled out the key points if that's okay. The Charity Trustee SubCommittee is asked to consider the contents of this report and grant approval to an extension of the lease of the Park Cafe to the existing operator, which is Mr. Ashley Charlesworth. On 15th of September 23, the Charity Subcommittee decision was made to authorise the current 2-year lease, which expires on the 31st of October this year, with a view to offering the cafe to the market during this period. There's still an intention to tender this opportunity, but the adjacent pavilion and lodge is currently progressing through a marketing exercise for a restaurant and a cafe opening, and discussions are on the way with interested parties. To ensure that the hospitality offer in Endcliffe Park are complementary as far as possible, it is recommended that it would be best to delay marketing the cafe until the full picture is clear on the pavilion and lodge. The charity objects for Endcliffe Park is provision of public walks and pleasure grounds. And the Charity Trustee SubCommittee is recommended to approve the grant of the lease of a term of 2 years to the existing cafe tenant at the end of the current lease, which is end of October, authorise the Head of Property Services to offer the property to the market during 2026 and identify a potential operator, but also note that the recommendation will be brought back to committee as to the results of that tender process and to seek approval to enter into a new lease arrangement with the recommended operator.
And if I can just add to what Joe has said, you will recall that at the last committee you approved the extension of the inflatables, the children's rides, for the same period. At which point we would anticipate both going out to market together, with the cafe being next door to the children's rides.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I go to questions and comments, bear in mind that there are 2 appendices in this report that are private. If you want to ask questions about those, we will have to adopt a private profile. So on that basis, any questions or comments? I'll take Fran first and then Douglas.
Thank you. Just quickly, yes, I mean, we talked about the inflatables at the last meeting, and the paper totes, you just mentioned there, the pavilion and the lodge. So the idea is that everything goes out at the same time, basically, when, and presumably, I mean, it talks about compromising situations or something here, but presumably that's so we're looking at having a different offer, if you like, between the lodge and the cafe in particular. I'm assuming the inflatables were not expecting to turn into a restaurant or something like that. So, but that's what we're thinking about, is really making sure that this goes out as a package of literally 3 things that might all be run by the same operator, or we look at how things fit together at that time if it's individual operators that come back and bid. Yeah.
So the lodge is currently being worked through. So you'll recall that that's already gone out to market following a decision being made at this committee. That work has taken slightly longer than we'd hoped, because we're currently getting a heritage statement for the building. Obviously, it's quite an important building with a lot of heritage to it. So what we're hoping is that at the point that we go out to market for the cafe and the children's rides, that we will know what is happening with the lodge, who that operator is, and exactly what their offer will be, to allow the cafe to ensure that it's complementary. Because what we don't want is to have the cafe go out to market and that person not know what is happening on another side of the park. I mean, they know that there's going to be an offer, but they don't know what it looks like, and that doesn't feel fair to a potential future operator in the cafe.
Okay, so sorry, they're not all 3 going out at the same time then. That's what I'm just saying. It's the lodge is currently out still. It's still out. Okay, and people bidding for that will know, obviously, that there is a cafe and there are inflatables. Okay.
We've already got offers on the lodge. We're just working through what that operator might be and the heritage elements there, and then a further decision will come back here. But that piece of work is very well established.
Douglas.
Thanks. I'm sure that there's plenty more work for Community Parks and Leisure Committee to do to look at the offer in the park as a whole, but from the charity point of view, I'm fine with this. It's all good.
Questions or comments? No. In that case, thank you very much for the report. We have some recommendations, which I've remembered this time. The recommendations are that the Charity Trustee SubCommittee is recommended to A, approve the grant of a lease for a term of 2 years to the existing cafe tenant at the end of the current lease. B, authorise the Head of Property Services to offer the property to the market during 2026, identify potential operators. And C, note that a recommendation will be brought back to the committee as to the results of the tender process and to seek approval to enter into a lease arrangement with the recommended operator. Is that agreed? That is unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Our final item today is Hillsborough car park. Now, I'm not sure if anybody has to declare an interest on this one, given the nature of it, but probably not. But is this again you, Ruth, and Joe? Okay, thank you.
Yes, so this is the Hillsborough Park car park licence to Sheffield Wednesday Football Club. Again, I'm not intending to read the full report, but I've pulled out the key points. So the Charity Trustee SubCommittee is asked to consider the contents of this report and grant approval to Sheffield Wednesday Football Club for an annual licence to use the car park. The car park is located off Parkside Road within the charitable park, and it is operated by a paying display for the general public. But since 2009, Sheffield Wednesday have had an annual licence which permits sole use between particular hours, and that is 4 hours prior to a match to kick off until 90 minutes after the final whistle, and that's for a maximum of 28 days each year throughout the football season. Sheffield Wednesday have confirmed that they wish to take a further licence for the 25-26 season, and the charity object for Hillsborough Park is the provision of public walks and pleasure grounds. The proposal to grant a licence of the car park on commercial terms are detailed in the closed Appendix 2, and that secures an increased contribution towards the running costs of the park. The Charity Trustee SubCommittee is recommended to approve the grant of the licence for 2025 to 2026 season to Sheffield Wednesday Football Club.
Okay, any questions or queries? This seems fairly straightforward to me. Thank you for your report. I'll immediately go to the vote on the recommendation, which is that the Charity Subcommittee is recommended to A, approve the grant of a licence to Sheffield Wednesday Football Club. Bizarrely, the recommendation also says SWFC, but I'm not quite sure. So be it. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your report. That concludes our business today, and I'm advised that the next meeting of this subcommittee will be on Monday the 24th of November at 2 o'clock. Thank you.